Greetings. Greetings, everybody, both here and out on the World Wide Web. My name is Alan Feldstein. I am member 1094 of the Adventurers Club of Los Angeles. I also am a proud member of the board of directors of the Cheetah Conservation Fund. And I am here today with Dr. Laurie Marker, the executive director and founder of the Cheetah Conservation Fund. Today, we are going to have an incredible program and learn a lot about not only the work that Laurie does, but the state of cheetahs, the work that's being done, and the future for cheetahs. So welcome, Laurie.
Thank you very much.
Nice to see you again.
Thank you.
And one of the things that I would like to do is, because I know you very well, but people don't, is tell us a little bit about your story. How did you get, because you live in Namibia, how did you get to Namibia?
Well, I've been there now for a long time, as you know. I moved there permanently about in 1991 and set up the Cheetah Conservation Fund in 1990. But my work in Namibia started in the middle of 1970s. And I got there because I was studying cheetahs. And I was studying cheetahs in Oregon at the Wildlife Safari, which is a wild animal park that had just opened in 1972 when I started working there. And the Wildlife Safari is very similar to the San Diego Wild Animal Park. They were built at the same time. And we were one of the few places in the world that had cheetahs. And I was fascinated with them. And I had moved up from California, so I'm a Californian. I had moved from LA up into Northern California and was in agriculture school. And I was in Napa and Davis, and I actually was going to be, and was, still am, I guess, a winemaker and a grape grower. But with that, the new frontier was in Oregon, and so I moved up to Oregon, and the Wildlife Safari had just opened, and I needed a job, and said, I raise animals. I brought my dairy goat farm with me, and had grown up on the back of a horse and followed veterinarians around as their bucket carrier my whole life, and I got a job in the clinic, and I wanted to know about cheetahs. Nobody knew anything about them. And so I wrote to people around the world, and I asked people what they could tell me about cheetahs, and that's when you wrote letters and put them in the mail, and eventually you got answers back. And people wrote back and they said, we don't know much about cheetahs. They've been revered for thousands of years, and yet nobody knows much about them. They don't breed well in captivity. We're losing them in the wild. They have a short lifespan. And when you find out something about cheetahs, let us know. And that opened the door. And when I was at the Wildlife Safari, I developed the most successful breeding program in all of North America. And then in the middle 1970s, I was asked to do a research project. And that research project was to find out if a captive-born cheetah could go back to Africa and what steps were involved in teaching them how to hunt.
Is that when you brought Cayenne over to Namibia?
That's when I took Cayenne over and taught her how to hunt. She and I learned how to hunt quite well together. But that's when I found out that farmers were killing cheetahs like flies. I mean, they were killing 800 to 900 cheetahs a year. And they saw me as a young American woman with a cheetah, and they thought I was crazy. And it's like, well, cheetahs, they're vermin. We kill them. What are you doing? And I was amazed. And I said, but look at cheetahs. They're the most amazing animal. And you've got them in your backyards. Somebody should do something. And I was young, and I thought there was a somebody. And I have to say, young people and old people, if you think that somebody will do something, let me tell you, they won't. I came back several months later after teaching Cayenne how to hunt, and came back to Oregon, and then at that point started what's called the International Stud Book, which is a registry of all the cheetahs in captivity. And at that point in time in the zoo world, we were starting the species survival plans and set up the cheetah species survival plan and brought the people from the zoo world together, and there were a very small handful of people to try to figure out what we were going to do to save the cheetah. And I kept saying, somebody's got to save them in the wild.
Then did you leave Cayenne in Namibia when you came back?
No, she came back.
With you?
She came back to Oregon, and she became a very famous ambassador, actually. And our story was actually shown on, I think, the American Sportsman. So it was a pretty interesting process to be involved in as a young person. And got to know the community in Namibia, a very small country at that point in time, and it was still an apartheid country under South African rule, and it was also a country that was in siege, I mean a war that was going on for their independence. And I came back to America at that point and then got very involved in many aspects of the research. We were still very involved in our breeding program. And in the early 80s, joined up with the Smithsonian and the National Cancer Institute and discovered the lack of genetic diversity within the cheetahs.
And why was that?
The cheetahs, we originally hypothesized, as we found out much at that point in time, their blood looked very similar. We had very big problems in reproduction with up to 70% abnormal sperm. We were looking at disease susceptibility, high infant mortality. And what we had discovered was that their blood genetically all looked very similar. And as we continued to do more research, and our research continues even today, originally it was thought to have gone through a population bottleneck, which was maybe about 12 to 15,000 years ago. What we now, over the years, have discovered that it has more been a very gradual decline. And so at some point in time, the cheetah actually had worldwide distribution. So they were found even here in North America. And we're not quite sure what happened, but their populations crashed. And then coming back very slowly, it's left them very genetically the same. So we've continued to monitor that genetically through all of our research that we do in Namibia.
And the population of cheetahs in Namibia, if I'm correct, is the greatest concentration of cheetahs is located in Namibia.
It is, and so we've called Namibia the cheetah capital of the world. There are about 15,000 cheetahs there, and Botswana has about a similar amount. So Southern Africa has about 50% of the world's population. Today, the world's population of cheetahs is only about 7,000 individuals. So they're at a pretty critical state at this point in time. They're found in 31 populations in 23 countries. And most of them are found outside of protected areas. So 70 to 80% are outside of protected areas. So with that, about 21 of the populations are under 100 individuals. So they are very, very vulnerable. So fragmentation, habitat loss, human-wildlife conflict, and now, unfortunately, illegal wildlife pet trade.
So that, we'll get to pet trade in a second, but from what I understand, one of the greatest threats in Namibia is human-wildlife conflict, is the farmers killing cheetahs because cheetahs allegedly kill livestock, because you'll talk to this, that it's not only cheetahs but leopards, but not necessarily farmers know the difference between that, and I think that's one of the programs that CCF does. But you discovered a very unique way of helping to solve this problem with the Livestock Guard Dog program, and why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, when I first moved into Namibia, and again I kept going back and forth to Namibia, to several of the other African countries, trying to find out what was going on with the wild population, and realized it was crashing for a variety of different reasons. And then felt that if anything was going to be done to save the cheetah, Namibia was going to be the country that something could be done. And so I moved there at Namibia's independence and went door to door talking to farmers and trying to find out why were they killing 800 to 900 cheetahs a year? And it could have been more. That was just what was reported. Was it really that they were killing that much livestock? Or was it a perceived threat to their livestock? And what we found is it was actually a perceived threat, that farmers around the world hate predators. For thousands of years, we've hated predators because of competition. And so it's not whether it's the leopard or the cheetah. A lot of it we found was how their livestock management played a role in the losses that they were having. And we were finding that some farmers weren't having the same kind of losses as other farmers and how they were managing their livestock. Now, I came from Oregon, and up in Oregon, we had sheep farmers, and there was dogs killing a lot of the sheep up there, and other predators. And back in the early 70s, a grant from the United States went out to people were poisoning predators, and it didn't seem to be helping, because if you kill predators like jackals, coyotes and jackals, more and more of them actually reproduce. And so by all the killing that we were doing here in America, it was not stopping the losses of those predators, or the livestock from the predators. The predators just continued. And so this grant actually started looking at alternatives, and one of them was with the Livestock Guarding Dog Association, and brought in livestock guarding dogs, a variety of breeds. And as we've learned, there's about 20 different breeds of livestock guarding dogs. And so I was watching this in Oregon, and we had Anatolian Shepherds, also called the Kangal dog, which is a Turkish breed. So when I went over to Namibia, I thought, I think dogs could work here. So some of the questions were, have you used dogs? Yes, we do. They're small. Oh, if they see a predator, they run. They're chasing the flock. And if you chase the flock and a predator's there, the predator wants to stalk, run, kill. And so these small dogs were causing more losses. And so we then started looking at bringing in a large breed. And so we started now 30 years ago. So our livestock guarding dog program is now 30 years old. And we started with Kangals and Anatolian Shepherds, and we've now bred over 800 of these dogs. We place the dogs when they are young, usually about maybe 10 weeks to 12 weeks of age. We've spayed and neutered them, and then work with the farming community. They grow up with the livestock, so they bond to the livestock, and they're the smarter member of the herd. So I think the dogs think that we as humans are maybe a little bit smarter than the goats. We're a little bit smarter than the sheep, but the dogs are very, very intuitive. This breed of dog coming from Turkey has been used for about 5,000 years. And they protect the livestock. They were bred originally to work in the Anatolian Plateau to protect against the flocks against the wolves. Also, 5,000 years ago, there were lions up there, and probably even cheetahs back in those days. And so they are very, very intuitive. They have a short hair coat, so they worked well in our very hot desert environment. And they can't get stuck in the thorn bushes, but they're intuitive. They're used to living in vast open areas, and they think. So there are about 20 different breeds of guarding dogs, and many of them have been raised in Europe, but maybe more in the small areas where they've got their livestock, where these dogs in the plateaus were covering vast areas, and they're an independent thinker. And so it worked very well for how we placed them in Namibia, and we continue to breed them and place them, and we see between an 80 to 100% reduction of livestock loss by using the dogs.
It's quite incredible, and to see the puppies there is, well, that's a lot of fun. But yeah, I've seen the dogs work out there, and it's quite amazing. In fact, I think there's about a year waiting list for
There's
this?
a couple year waiting list.
Yeah. That farmers really see this as a methodology to protect their livestock.
It's very, very, very well received. And over these years, we've now helped other countries work with the programs. Of course, we monitor it. As a research organization, every dog is monitored its entire life. And the amount of data that we've been able to collect and share has been able to help predators, reduction of predator losses on a global scale. And so we love cheetahs, but we love all the other predators. And yes, it could be a leopard or could be a cheetah, but it's also tied into how you as a farmer is raising your livestock. And we very closely try to teach farmers that they're intricately involved in the loss of their livestock. And it's going to cause you money, and so you might as well manage your livestock better. So we have a Future Farmer of Africa training program, and we teach farmers more about how their livestock can be raised in a healthy way, how to best manage it, whether it's through vaccinations or deworming, trimming of hooves, corralling your animals, having a calving season, because management of your livestock is really an integrated system and not one thing. There's no silver bullet, I always say. And we in Namibia pride ourselves with our wildlife. And our wildlife lives on land with our livestock. And there we have conservancies.
Well, I was just going to say, you know, one of the things that has always impressed me about Namibia is it has conservation written into its constitution, and there are these conservancies. And explain a little bit more about those wildlife conservancies that exist in Namibia, because it really engages the entire country and population to protect and be respectful of wildlife that's out there.
Well, absolutely. At Namibia's independence, it was clear that it was a poor country, and there was no way that we were going to be able to go out and protect all of our wildlife, so to speak, with you know, Fish and Wildlife or police force, and felt that the communities would be our best way of protecting our wildlife, and so set up conservancies. And right now, about 40% of our country is in conservation, under conservation use. 20% is government parks, and the other 20% are private and communal conservancies. And 80% of our wildlife is found outside of our protected areas, and so the communities are very, very important. And the conservancies are set up that they demarcate land, and then there's a governance structure. And much of our wildlife that is managed through support of ecotourism, but the communities are very, very engaged in it. And it's taken us years to develop the system, but now most of Africa is picking up on what's gone on. The conservancies that are up in Kenya have all modeled after Namibia. I think Zimbabwe had good programs about the same time as Namibia, and those continued to grow. But community-based programs are really important. And what communities are doing is managing their natural resources. But instead of saying your wildlife needs to be in a national park, the conservancies look at integrated programs. So what we say, you grow grass, you protect your livestock, and you have wildlife, and then predators can fit within the system. Because predators aren't your problem, protecting your livestock and not having enough wildlife is the problem. And wildlife and predators play an important role, and when you have predators, you can have a greater amount of biodiversity within your systems. And in arid landscapes, that's very important, because in some areas, arid landscapes are called dead zones, because all you have is sand or gravel or other aspects. When you've overgrazed the land, you end up with things like thickened thorn bush, which takes over.
So that's a great segue. So I was fortunate to visit CCF for the first time in 2011. That's when you and I met for the first time. And, you know, CCF is this working farm, and it, besides the Livestock Guard Dog program, it has another breed of dog that you do things with, and it has a number of other incredible programs like the goat cheese program and the BushBlok programs. Tell us about some of CCF's programs. First of all, tell us about the other use of dogs at CCF, because
okay,
I know you love this part.
Well, we do. We are a science-based organization, and so our work is really trying to understand not only the genetic makeup of the cheetah continually, so we've got a full-scale genetics lab there on site, as well as a registered veterinary clinic. And so we've got great scientists, and what we pride ourselves in is training and developing the best scientists for Africa. And it makes me very proud. But out of that, over the years, you know, when you are looking at DNA, you usually have blood samples and tissue samples. But fortunately, the farmers have quit catching and killing so many cheetahs, and so over the years, we've had our hands on over almost 1,500 cheetahs, and so we've collected all the genetics and blood on those animals and have analyzed it. But fortunately, they've stopped killing so much. But we use dogs that are called detection dogs, and they find samples for us. And so they're trained to find cheetah scat, also trained actually to find wild dog scat, because we also work on African wild dogs. And so as detection dogs, they are out scouring the landscape, of course, with our ecologist along in tow. And then the scat, we call it black gold, comes into our genetics lab where we can extract it and look at the DNA. And so that's been a very, very useful part of our ongoing work. And not only have we covered much of Namibia, we've also covered much of Angola at this point in time, because Angola was pretty denuded of wildlife, and particularly because of all the wars that have gone up there. And so now trying to find out more about where the wildlife is has been very fascinating, and the use of the dogs has been great. So black gold not only can share with you the DNA by processing it, but we can also then wash it, and we can find out what the cheetahs are eating. We look at the hair under the microscope, and much of that early work helped us understand more that cheetahs would rather have wild prey than they would your livestock. And sharing that with the farmers, again, got a lot of good buy-in from the farming community. And cheetahs go to what are called marking trees or play trees. The farmers used to think that they were going to these trees and playing, but really they're going to these trees that have a slope, and they would jump in it, and they can have a great view of where the prey might be, and they would leave their scat there. And the females cover multiple home ranges of males, and so it's very matriarchal. So we learned an awful lot about how cheetahs are living, and the black gold allowed us to even look at the hormones of the animals as well. So there's a lot that you can find out of scat. So get a dog and go find scat.
and I want to talk more about the programs, but you mentioned something I think it's very interesting is, cheetahs are such a unique cat, in many different ways, not only physically, but how they live. So tell us a little bit more, because the females tend to be the solitary animals, correct? And the boys sort of hang out in groups, coalitions together and stuff. Yeah. So how is the range of cheetahs, and how does a population operate out in the wild?
Well, they've got huge home ranges, so they've got ranges larger than almost any mammal species. Wild dogs, wolves probably, but huge home ranges, anywhere from 800 square miles is an average home range. And so males then will stick together. So when they're born to a mother, she might have up to 6 cubs, 4 to 5 are average. Thumb suck, we know it's about 50%, although, sometimes you might have 3 and 2 or 1 and 4, but overall it's pretty much 50-50. And the males stay together their entire lives, and they form what are called coalitions. And they will stick with their mom until they're males and female cubs. After a 3-month gestation, cubs are born, and at about 6 weeks, they start following the mom out, and her home range is small, and then over time, as the cubs are bigger, they go further and further and further and further. And they're covering multiple males' home ranges, and as the males are at about 4 years of age, they start becoming territorial, and then their ranges become much smaller and usually are focused in on many of these marking trees. And there is a lot of crossover with them. There's with males' home ranges, and that works okay. So they're not as territorial as like some of the other, like lions might be, unless you've got a reduction of their territory potentially during like droughts. But the female that's showing her cubs around these areas, she's got mate choice. And so she would ideally go back to the same male at about 2 years of age and try to breed again. Unfortunately, it's these play trees, which is where the farmers put the cage traps, and the cheetahs get often caught there. And so we've tried to then stop the catching of the cheetahs by the farmers by sharing with them more about how cheetahs live. And so the female would cover multiple ranges, and then when their females and male cubs are at about 2 years of age, the female is bred again. At about 22 months, she might give birth. The last litter of cubs moves away. Female cubs stay within her mother's home range, and the males will stick with their sisters for maybe about 5 or 6 months until dominant males start coming in to want to breed with the females. They get moved out. They become transient for a couple years, trying to find a place where they can fit. And then at about 4 years of age, they usually will find a territory. And so it's a very interesting way, but the males move a couple 100 kilometers away from their mother's home range. But how they're moving around, I think, is just fascinating. We've learned all this through collaring of the animals. For years and years, we were tracking them. I was tracking them from airplanes in the early days. These days, fortunately, we have satellite collars, and so you can stay at the luxury of your own home and look at them where they're moving on a satellite on your computer. That's a joke because we're in the middle of the bush, but beyond that.
But you do have good internet there, that's for sure.
Well, most of the time.
Most of the time, yeah.
But so understanding how they're living, I think, is really important, and sharing that with the farmers. Today, we actually have geofences, and so when we got cats collared, we've got farmers that we put a geofence around, and when the cheetahs that are collared move into those areas, they alert the farmers, and then we can actually work with the farmers. The farmer will know maybe to protect his livestock closer. And so calves have been a real big problem in Namibia, not just the small stock. So the dogs work well for the small stock, goats and sheep. But we also put dogs, and we've learned much more about how to do this. It's a little bit more difficult to put them with calves because we are such vast in the territory where we're working. For a livestock farmer in Namibia, it's like 1 cow per 28 hectares, which is like 1 cow for almost 50 acres, I think. So very, very vast, very arid lands. And so that's why we suggest having calving seasons. And so with that, then the cows will all give birth at the same period of time. The calves are there, we can put the dogs there, but we also use guarding donkeys. And we have done a lot of research now on that as well, to learn more about how the donkeys bond and actually protect the calves from predators. And donkeys are pretty aggressive.
Wow, that's a new one for me. That's great.
And they kick and they bite and they will scare away, cheetahs and leopards. So that's been a very interesting process to learn more about as well.
But you talk about farmers, but CCF also has its own herd of goats and
cattle.
And has phenomenal cheese and ice cream and all sorts of great products, that soap. So tell us a little bit more about the dancing goats.
Well, great. Well, we are a model farm. And so we are a private reserve, and we're based on about 150,000 acres of land. It started small, and we bought farms around us to develop a conservancy. And so we're part of what's called the Waterberg Conservancy. But our conservancies, again, are integrated systems. And so we have, and I grew up as an agriculture farmer, a goat farmer, and on the back of my horse. I love my livestock. And so we are a model farm. So we've got a huge herd of cattle, goats and sheep, and our livestock guarding dogs. So our livestock guarding dogs have to grow up with the goats and sheep. And we have them placed on our camps around our farm with our calving cows to protect our calves. And we have not only meat goats and sheep, but we also have dairy goats. And I'm an old dairy goat farmer. I actually was a goat judge back in my early days. And so, again,
that's a new one I've learned too.
Yeah, but that's a nice way of, segmenting into the farmers. Going into Namibia, it was like, well, who are you?
You can talk their language, yeah.
You're just a young lady, well, who are you? Well, I'm a scientist, but I used to be a goat judge. So I can tell you a lot about your goats. And that got me a lot of credibility as well. But we have a lovely dairy goat farm, and I just figured, well, you don't have to eat all your goats. Why don't we just keep them and figure out how we can make products that could help our rural communities? And you don't need to have refrigeration to make cheeses. So you can milk your goats, and we teach pasteurization, and which is, again, very important for disease for humans and how to best take care of your own hygiene. And then we make cheeses, we make soap, we make really good cheese, and we make really good ice cream.
Yes, you do.
So it's been a lot of fun, and we now have developed a dairy goat industry that we have people coming in, learning about our goats, learning about how to care for them, and learning how to make cheeses. And with that, of course, we're trying to scale up in some of the other countries that we work in as well.
So in addition to that, you talked a bit about earlier, another program that I'm fascinated about at CCF is because of the war and a lot of other things and the grazing, there was a thorn bush problem. And you guys found a way to try and solve that.
We did. That was another one of, oh, if I let them know something more about it, somebody should do something about it. Overgrazing is a real big problem in Africa. And if you've been to Africa, it is humans and a lot of livestock. And as the human population grows, the livestock population grows. And many of the areas where cheetahs are found are in very, very arid landscapes. And with that, you either get sand and gravel and no grass that grows, or you get invasive bush. And that invasive bush in Namibia is thorn bush, which has taken over. And our country of Namibia is about 2.5 times the size of California. And a size of California is so thickly thorn bush that it's reduced the income to the farming communities, where they were making a certain amount of money with one farm. They now have 2 or 3 to try to make the same amount of income. And that is caused from the droughts that occurred in the early days. There was a bad drought in the 30s, one in the 60s, one in the 80s. By the 60s, though, the impact had started, and the thorn bush seeds had started taking over. And by the 80s, when the drought hit, we started to see this impact of bush encroachment. And so the thorn bushes have very, very deep roots, and they take the underground water. So it's a form of desertification. And we found that the cheetahs were trying to hunt in this thickened thorn bush, and we were finding cheetahs scratched in the eyes and blinded, which then caused them to be a problem animal because they couldn't see the game and they'd try to find livestock. So we started putting these things together, and again, I thought somebody should do something about the thick thorn bush. The farmers would say, well, we can't kill the bush, and so we kill the predators because it's caused us such an economic loss. And so in looking at that, I said, well, in Oregon, we used to see chip trucks go by, and they're selling these chips. Somebody ought to be doing something with these chips. Well, the next thing I know, we've got a biomass program. And we started by trying to figure out the harvest and how do you actually harvest the bush. When we harvest it by hand, we now have gone a little bit mechanical, but we started putting people to work, and you had to figure out what kind of tonnage you could get out of it. And we get about 10 tons per hectare of thorn bush, but we don't clear cut. We do it at about a 70% cut rate, and we are Forest Stewardship Council certified, which is the highest level of forest protection. And I think that that's an important thing to, I'm very involved in certification, believe it's very important. And so we have been harvesting the bush, and then when we figured out what kind of tonnage and how you put the people together and how much a ton costs by labor, and all of our labor force are paid at a rate that, it's not subsistence. It is a government rate, basically, because we wanted to really show what could be done. And then we started making a fuel log, which is a high heat, low emission, and it's called BushBlok. And they're like Duraflame logs, but Duraflame logs do have additives. Ours are only thorn bush. And we've gotten several awards for this, high heat, low emission. And we're now trying to look at a variety of other biomass programs. So we've just gotten a couple of years ago a big EU grant with about 15 other partners. And we are developing something that isn't developed yet, but it is a steam bio, and we're looking at using steam in a big, what we call the toaster oven, where the chips would go through it, and they'd get to a point of torrefraction, which is at a point which is just below charcoal. And if we could get this process going, it could actually change how the world is looking at coal these days. And it could reduce the thorn bushes, and we've got thorn bush throughout Africa that is at a high rate. And as our founding president of Namibia, President Inyoma, who was our international patron for 25 years and helped me develop the Bush program, he kept saying, wow, this is just great. You can, have more grasses, more wildlife, and then you can have more cheetahs. So biomass is a very important program that we're trying to look at and go to scale.
And I've seen that biomass thing, and it looks like something out of Mad Max in the middle of the bush someplace. It just appears and all. So we have the livestock guard dogs, we have the goats, we have the scat dogs. You do an educational program there. We have a tourist program there. But I'd like to move from Namibia for a second because as I've known you for so long, no moss grows under those feet. So I want to take you to Somaliland and what you've started there and why you've started it there, which was illegal wildlife trade.
Well, and it's a heartbreak, actually. We got into Somaliland. Well, we got into the Horn of Africa around 2005, which cheetahs were being caught, a couple of them. We got found. We started realizing what was going on and tried to help from afar. But every time a cheetah cub was caught, we got called, and you didn't hear about many of them. And that was in Ethiopia, and then next thing you know, we were getting called from Somaliland. And the cubs were just dying like flies. They'd call, we got a cub in, and the next day it'd be dead. And it was like, something's got to give here. And next thing I knew, in 2017, I was in Somaliland. And Somaliland is not Somalia. It is a breakaway country of Somalia, and it wants to be an independent country. It's not recognized. But they were really concerned about the illegal wildlife pet trade. And they said, please come and help. And I ended up there trying to say, well, you've got to have something. There's got to be medicines that we can have for the animals. There's got to be a clinic of some sort. And found there were human hospitals, and we started getting some help from that, trying to figure out what medicines were there, and not much. Next thing you know, around 2018, we've got our first safe house. And a couple years later, we had 5 facilities and 20 to 30 cheetah cubs a year coming in. A couple years ago, the government then gave us a large piece of land, of which we've developed at this point about 800 acres. And we now have 97 cheetah cubs that are there. And of that, in the beginning, many of them came to us just about dead. And we've been able to go from about 50% loss to less than 10% loss because we've got international veterinarians there, we've got an international animal health care keeper staff there. These safe houses were horrific, that we had to build as fast as we could, and couldn't build even fast enough. And then 2 years ago, started putting the dirt and building up the facility. We now have all of the 97 cheetahs out on this 800 acres that we've developed in huge compounds, anywhere from 2 acres to 5 to 10 acres, where the groups of animals, as they've come in, we keep them in age-grouped animals. As they reach a certain age, we will separate the males from the females, and the males get to live in their coalitions. And then from this, we we've built a veterinary clinic, and we're looking at phase 2 as being, it'll be an area that we could start looking at potential reintroduction of these animals, but it is the start of the first national parks and conservancies in Somaliland. So we don't want to have these animals in captivity. We want to stop them, and that's like what we're doing in Namibia. We've got orphan animals there, but we don't want them. We want to keep them living free and in the wild, and that's why we've got the dog program, the farmer training programs. And in Namibia, in Somaliland, we've had to start by helping develop laws. And so we're working with the parliament and the legal force, and there were no laws for community programs, conservancies, or national parks. There are no national parks. We are almost at the laws in Parliament. It's taken us a couple years at this point with a variety of consultants helping develop these programs. We've gotten good grants in Somaliland from DEFRA, from the EU, DEFRA is from the UK, from IUCN. It's been very, very important to have gotten some of these grants. And then I started looking at development of conservancies.
And what is the state of smuggling? Is it gone down? Has it gone up? Are people more aware of it now? Or?
People are much more aware. We've done a lot of awareness campaigns. I mean, we've been there now since, again, 2017. And we've covered the country in surveys. As you know, we got a grant from the Explorers Club, the Discovery Channel, and we were able to cover a lot of the land. Grants from IUCN that has allowed us to go out and survey and do social surveys as well as ecological surveys to understand much more about maybe where populations of cheetahs are. There are cheetahs in the country. The country is, the animals are coming up also from Ethiopia, and so we're also working across the border in the Somali region of Ethiopia. And so a lot of them are coming up from there, but there are cheetahs in Somaliland and also in Puntland and Somalia. Our last cheetah cub that we just got a couple weeks ago actually was from Puntland, which is a part of Somalia, and it's also kind of an autonomous state. And we ended up with doing an MOU with them to bring it over to our center. There had been 3, 2 of them died. When the second one died, the government finally sent them to us. And so I think that that's very important. We don't want sanctuaries everywhere like this. We want to keep them in the wild. And they're very expensive. For every one cheetah, I mean, we go through 100 goats a week. We've got 97 cheetahs, and that's at $100 a goat. So you can kind of imagine it's like eating money, but beyond that. The cheetahs are growing well and strong. We've gotten through a lot of health issues with them. I think there's a lovely veterinarian out here who we've gone through coronavirus, FIP, we've gone through herpes and calices, everything that you can, canine distemper, and it's been horrific. But having this great facility now has allowed us, the animals are much healthier and doing well. So the trade, a lot more awareness. We've been able to develop a national task force of the police, and with working together with the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, which is our partner there. Of course, we work with the Ministry of Education. We're working with everybody, anywhere, to try to stop this trade.
And as part of that awareness campaign, you just recently had a global cheetah summit, and that was in Ethiopia, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. And how did that turn out?
Well, it was great. Very, very important, and something we'd worked towards for a number of years. It's the first time that we've brought people together from all around the world. We've had regional workshops, but it was really important to really start looking at the big picture. And of course, you know, I think about the big picture all the time, and what does that really mean? And it means that our motto, save the cheetah, change the world. And we're ready to do that. But we had to start by bringing everybody through where we're at, what all the regions look like for the populations, what the problems were, where we really are, and what we can really do. And we've developed these tools, and not just ourselves, but several of the colleagues that we work with. The conference, I think, was about 130 people from 80 institutions, organizations, and about 15 different countries. Many of the different cheetah range countries, and we were there to actually talk about what we can do to save the cheetah.
Were there people from India there?
There were Indian people there.
And one of the reasons I asked that question is that, you know, it's, save the cheetah, save the world is putting cheetahs back to where they originally existed. And one of those places was India that you were involved in.
That's right. And we were involved in that 2 years ago, taking the cheetahs back into India. And it was a process that we've been working on for well over 15 years. And it's a hard process. The cheetah went extinct back in the 1950s. And we've seen the loss of cheetahs in the last 50 years. We've lost at least 20 of the countries in the last 50 years. And we're trying to look at where we could bring cheetahs back into. India is the only large carnivore or any animal that they've actually lost. And they wanted to bring it back. And bringing a top predator back was not just about, bring the cheetah back. It was to looking at their arid lands. And these grasslands, which they call them dead lands at this point, because you don't have a top predator there and there's not the biodiversity. And so if we can bring that top predator back into these grasslands, we can get the biodiversity back at the same time. And so it was quite a process, and I think that looking at that, we work very closely with the Indian government, and the Indian government and the Namibian government have a very close relationship. And India asked Namibia if they would support it, and Namibia said yes. They would provide cheetahs, and then they asked the Cheetah Conservation Fund if we would identify the cheetahs that could be brought back into India for reintroduction. And so it was quite an honor to be a part of, and brought the cheetahs there. The plane I think you're seeing is a wonderful plane with the tigers bringing the cheetah back into India. And we brought the cats back, and it was a part of the Explorers Club. We shared the flag, and it was a very proud moment, I think, for all of us. From that, we presented the cheetahs to the Prime Minister for his 70th birthday, and it was the 75th year of independence for India as well.
So my 70th birthday is next year, so just a hint, that maybe do something with cheetahs.
Where are we going to put cheetahs? Okay.
There's
another 20 countries that need them.
And I got a big backyard, too.
But so we looked at this conference at where we needed to put augmentation. When you've got, 100 individuals in 20 of the countries, they need augmentation. That's a genetic bottleneck right there that needs some help. And so those are the kinds of things that this
And what are
conference
some of
brought
those
forward.
other countries that you're looking at?
Well, right now we're looking at willing people who want to bring the prey back. But we're also looking at where these small populations are and what needs to happen. And some of the highlights of this really look at community-based conservation. And we put together 10 different groups to try to go forward with the programs, and one of them is the conservancies. We believe conservancies have a huge way that we can wrap our heads around where cheetahs are living right now. Again, they're not in national parks, and if the communities can start benefiting, and we know how to help with that, we can then help develop ways of saving some of these populations. Augmentation might be bringing cheetahs in. Areas that potentially want cheetahs might be areas like Saudi Arabia, where they did go extinct in the 70s. And interesting enough, they found mummies not long ago that date back to, thousands and thousands of years. But we know that the cheetah went extinct there in the 70s. And so these are some recent extinctions, but you need to bring back prey, and you need the grasslands. And then with that, you have to look at supporting the communities and looking at livelihoods. And so these livelihood development programs become a really key part of this. And then also looking at these areas being some of the driest and hottest areas in the world. And so climate change is a big problem in some of the poorest areas in the world. And so we are trying to then look at, I'm going to scaling up, and scaling up really means how do we find the funding to do the work that needs to be done?
Perfect word, funding. Well done. Because as we're getting here close to the end of our time, your guard dog program, your scat dog program, the cheese program, Somaliland, and all this, it takes money to do those. So for those of you out there, I hope you will support CCF. But besides donating, what else can we do to save the cheetah and save the world?
Well, I hope that spread awareness, obviously, but funding goes a long way. Out of it, people can help us through things like, sponsoring one of our cheetahs. Go on our website, cheetah.org. It's the best website. We've got a lot of different initiatives on there. We've got chapters, so we've got cheetah chapters in different areas of the country. Get involved with us to spread the word and find the right people that want to get involved with us and tell the stories. You can sponsor a Livestock Guarding Dog as well. You can come and visit us in Namibia through our ecotourism.
Which you definitely should do. It's an amazing place, yes.
And we take interns. I think there's a couple of our interns out here that through some of the relationships that we have with many of the universities here in the United States, but also globally. We get a lot of international students as well as our Namibian students. And so internships are critical and help support interns. So we work with a lot of different universities. So there's a variety of different ways that people could get involved.
And you can also donate on our live stream right now too. We've opened that up and
Wow,
stuff. So
please do donate. So.
Yeah. So I wanna open it up to questions. But before we do that, we have a surprise for you, Laurie. And I'd like to call up Rich Mayfield, our president, and we have a little presentation for you.
Oh my.
So normally at the end of these presentations, we have a certificate of appreciation for you. If you've been here before, you've seen us stand at the map and say, this is our certificate of appreciation. Thank you for the wonderful program. But for people truly outstanding in their fields, we have the opportunity to do a little bit more. The last people that we did this for was Bill Morris of the Cambodian Landmine Relief Fund, and Buzz Aldrin of the moon, right? So
Buzz and I share a birthday,
what
and we
would
just
like to
named
do
a cheetah after him. So
is we would like to present you with this, and this is a certificate of honorary membership in our club as
Thank
member
you.
number 1252. Also, the first female honorary member of the
Oh
Adventurers
my.
Club of Los Angeles.
Wow.
So, you can meet me at the map here.
Thank
This
you.
certifies that Dr. Laurie Marker, who has left the beaten path and made for the adventure, has been admitted in the companionship, the Adventurers Club of Los Angeles, as an honorary member on April 28th, 2024. Member number 1252.
Thank you very much.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
And
a
we
huge
also have
honor.
a member button for you. This normally never happens this fast, but you're gonna come here and you're gonna leave with the member button.
Wow.
So we'll get you a Sharpie to put your name and number on this.
Okay.
But it's great. It's great to have you. Like I said, we have all of 5 honorary members, so this is not something that we do for everybody. It's
Thank
only
you.
for people that are truly outstanding in their
Wow.
field.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow, what a huge honor. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you. Wow. As I said, Buzz Aldrin and I share the same birthday. And this year for my birthday, we asked the world who wanted to help name a cheetah and what name it was. And one of them was
Buzz?
Buzz.
Great. That's
So we have a
great.
cheetah named Buzz.
So we have some time for some questions, and there's a microphone, so pass it around.
Laurie, you mentioned that you're a science-based foundation, and I'm curious about the bottleneck that you talked about and how you're approaching solving that bottleneck problem for the genetics of the cheetah.
Well, as I mentioned, the bottleneck was something that we had originally thought on, but as our research has continued, we've actually found that it was a low population over a long period of time that has caused the long-term genetic reduction of genetic diversity. And you can't ever bring genetic diversity back, but what we can do is stop the loss of any more. And that's why every single animal is so important and why we don't want any more of them killed. We don't want them to be brought in for the illegal wildlife pet trade, and we want to keep them living free and in the wild. And so they will, we always say that the cheetah is, it wants to live, and it has survived it's one of the oldest of all of the cats, and it has survived, and it is a survivor. And if we can just maintain these habitats and work with the communities, we think that the cheetah and the lack of genetic diversity will continue. It's not going to change, but we're not going to lose more. And so what we want to do is not lose more.
On that same issue, do you work with zoos then? Do you trade? So there's no, like, you don't have to keep it India-related cheetahs. They're not, like, different. They're all kind of the same blood.
Well, all the cheetahs are pretty much the same. So, and there are, as I said, there's only 7,000 of them. And we do work with zoos, but the zoos, I manage the International Stud Book and work together with the species survival plans and the European survival plans. And it's looking at the management of it. There's only about 150 cheetahs born a year in the world out of a global zoo population of only 1,800 individuals. They never bred well in captivity. But with that, we've been able to manage that population. And we are now looking, when I started by putting Cayenne back out into the wild and know that she could learn how to hunt. We now do rehabilitation and started about 15 years ago in Namibia and have developed a very good rehabilitation program with many of the orphans that we get in from Namibia. And we've developed the programs for this. And so some of the cheetahs that went to India are second and third generations that were born from our rehabbed animals. But they didn't come in as bottle babies. They were animals that came in at a couple to 3 months of age, and they hate you. You grow them up until they're a couple years old. And then we put them back out in the wild. And just a couple days ago, we put 2 of our young males that we've been growing up back out in the wild, and we've got staff there tracking them. Justin's out there tracking them as we speak right now. And we got in, unfortunately, a couple other cubs a few days ago, which will probably in the next couple years be able to be rehabilitated. So we do know that we can put cheetahs back out into the wild, and the zoos may play a very, very important role for us in the future. And so it's kind of interesting to see life go full circle. And you've been in this business for a long time too, and we know that we talked about zoos playing a key role. We're now seeing the importance of reintroduction. But reintroduction of animals is harsh, it's hard, and what we want to do is, with our work, reduce any problems, and we've developed techniques to be able to help put cheetahs back into the wild successfully.
A question about the BushBlok. If I heard you right, you said you only process about 70% of the thorn bush? But if it's invasive, why would you not?
Well, because for biodiversity. And so we only clear 70%. And then we also want different levels. So we want to make sure that our canopy has different levels for the birds and the insects and everything else. And so it is a thickened thorn bush, and what we want to do is to clear it so that it makes a more natural landscape. And so these grasslands were never just clear cut. So you always have bushes and trees, and they're very important.
How do you teach a cheetah to hunt?
Well, fascinating. There's a variety of ways. What we do now is when their cubs are growing up, and all of our cubs that are going to be rehabbed are not around people, other than the keepers that feed them. And so they hear and know the car, or that know the voice of the people that are feeding them. And then we exercise our animals very actively, and so they're out in large areas, and they have to chase the car to get their food. And these are very large areas, not just the size of the room. 5 to 10 acres in what they're running around in. And so they're living out in the middle of the bush, they're exercised, and so they know and they're aware of what it looks like and sounds like, and they see the animals that they're supposed to hunt. And they're in good condition. And so then when you put them out in the wild, they have to explore. And so exploring the area is really important. And they're covering a lot of area, but you then still have to supplementally feed them. And so they'll hear the car, and they know that if they're hungry, and we will wait several days, we feed them very good before they go out. And then we'll supplementally feed them. But we find actually with the process that we go through, it's usually within a couple weeks that they're starting to begin to hunt. And it's a trial and error. and they want to chase something that they've seen, and as they chase and run, it's then figuring out, well, how do I catch it? But they're faster than everything else, and so they don't fully know that until they're out doing that comparison of what I'm looking at. And so it's exploratory what they're looking for. And then once they make a kill, they're pretty quick on knowing exactly what to do. So it's been fascinating to be able to go through that process.
Laurie, where's the greatest concentration of cheetahs as pets?
Well, the greatest concentration has been in the Middle East. And that's where the trade has gone. And we've worked closely in the Middle East to try to get the laws changed. And so the Middle East has been actively working with us to change the laws, but it is illegal. And they are still, unfortunately, going into that direction. And they go from Somaliland over into Yemen, which is the shortest distance. It's maybe 2 hours by a small boat. And then once they're in Yemen, which is not this, it's kind of a war-torn country right now, and then get up into the Middle East. And that has been our biggest problem. But we're trying hard to change both the demand side and the supply side.
Do you get into training, like, to not eat livestock? Is there a way to dissuade them from having that as a...
If they have caught livestock, we would call that a problem animal, and if you can remove them from those areas, and some of those areas might be animals we put in a game reserve that's fenced, and there are no livestock there, and then they will start hunting wildlife again. But we found that of the cheetahs that were caught by the farmers, less than like 2% are problem animals. And those problem animals that catch livestock have either been orphan cubs, babies without a mom, and they need to be with mom until they're about 1.5 years of age before they can even hunt on their own, or they've got some sort of an injury. Maybe they've got a broken tooth, broken foot. Those are your problem animals. And what we've tried to do is to teach the farmers that it's not every animal that's a problem. A problem animal is there's something wrong with it. And that educational process with the farmers, I think, is very, very important. And so that they used to think they're all problems, and then they're not. And they would much rather have wildlife, but you need to make sure that we have enough grass and enough wildlife. And Namibia is, again, one of the best countries in the world because we have wildlife. And we've got people who love their wildlife, and that's why we're trying to encourage more countries to have wildlife and wildlife conservancies, and then look at like ecotourism. And we have a small ecotourism lodge, so we welcome people to come and visit us. We're very small, but we're an educational. So we always say, go off on a tour and on a safari first. We have lots of wildlife where we are, but when you come to CCF, you're going to learn about what it takes to save a species. You'll go through our museum, you'll go through our genetics lab, learn from our scientists, and our ecologists on how the animals live. And I think people do enjoy visiting us, and we welcome people to come and visit us. So,
It's an amazing place.
Yeah, I know that there's some issues around transportation of cheetahs, and I know it's very difficult. I was wondering if there's been any advancements in, sedation, or how you get them to all these places where you're trying to reintroduce them, and what kind of efforts are going into that right now?
well, we've not had problems with transportation. And so all the animals that we transport are fine. And we've got good crates. We have our way of doing it. And so if you want to do it right, join us.
All right, great. Well, thank you all very much for attending. For those of you who are listening to our live stream, thanks for joining. Be sure to subscribe to our channel. And remember, we have presentations at the club every Thursday. And so if you've enjoyed this event and are in town, come by and visit the world-famous Adventurers Club of Los Angeles. Thank you very much.
And I'm now a member.
Well, no, actually, we have some